Hi, this is Jessica Fisher.
And I'm Morgan Hearn.
And this is channel 1948.
And today we're going to be talking about containment.
Containment is a U.S. policy using numerous strategies to prevent the spread of communism abroad. This policy was a response to a series of moves by the Soviet Union to enlarge communist influence in Eastern Europe, China, Korea, and Vietnam.
The first topic of today is the Marshall Plan. The U.S. started to fear that the poverty and unemployment after World War II was making the Communist Party more appealing.
George C. Marshall, Secretary of State, wanted to advance the idea that the European self-help program financed by the United States.
The U.S. gave over $12 billion in economic support that ended up helping to rebuild Western European economies.
Western European industries were producing twice as much as they had been the year right before the war began.
In the end, none of these nations of Western Europe faced a serious threat of communist takeover for the duration of the Cold War.
Our next topic is the Truman Doctrine. On March 12, 1947, President Harry S. Truman declared the Truman Doctrine to be the foreign policy of the United States, to aid any country who was going to be threatened by the communism.
At the beginning, he wanted $400 million to assist both Greece and Turkey.
This became known as the official declaration of the Cold War.
Truman said, "It must be the policy of the U.S. to support free peoples who are resisting attempted subjugation by armed minorities or by outside pressures." This segment is on how America's commitment to Europe is demonstrated.
To stop the spread of communism to the Western Europe from the Soviet-controlled unions of Eastern Europe, the U.S. began to form NATO, which stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
They formed that with many of the non-communist nations in Europe, including France and Britain. This determination to stop the spread of communism is known as the policy of containment and was the basis for many U.S. foreign policy decisions during the Cold War.
And now for our commercial break.
It's Saturday night and he's craving some chicken.
I really want some chicken.
Now introducing Chick-fil-A. Eat more chicken!
Our next topic is communism in China.
Mao Zedong, the leader of China, was a communist who took power in 1949. Communist success in China convinced American leaders that they needed to be more energetic in a worldwide struggle against communism.
This led to a huge increase in U.S. spending on defense.
This is the first militarized instance of containment, as South Korea and the U.S. fight against communist North Korea.
In June 1950, Korean troops surged across the border into South Korea, triggering the first major confrontation between the forces of the communist and non-communist worlds.
People's Republic of China and the Soviet Union lent their support to North Korea, and the U.S. did the same for South Korea.
Fighting ended July 27, 1953, when an armistice agreement was signed.
This restored the border between the Koreas near 38th parallel and created the Korean Demilitarized Zone, a 2.5-mile wide fortified buffer zone between the two nations. Next up, we have Joseph McCarthy.
He was an American politician who was a Republican senator of the U.S. in 1947. He gave a speech on Lincoln Day and said the State Department was full of communists.
We have here Joseph McCarthy himself, who'd like to speak on what he said.
Senator Joseph McCarthy, and this is what I said on Lincoln Day. The State Department is infested with communists. I have here in my hand a list of 205 names that were made known to the Secretary of State as being members of the Communist Party and who nevertheless are still working for the communists today.
McCarthy accused just as fast as dominoes fall over. Next, we have the domino theory.
This theory held that a communist victory in one nation would quickly lead to a chain reaction of communist takeovers in neighboring states.
In Southeast Asia, the U.S. government used the domino theory to justify its support for a non-communist regime in South Vietnam against the communists. Government of North Vietnam and its ultimately increasing involvement in the long-running Vietnam War from 1954 to 75.
American failure to prevent a communist victory in Vietnam had much less of a global impact than they had assumed by the domino theory.
Communist regimes did arise in Laos and Cambodia after 1975. Communism failed to spread throughout the rest of Southeast Asia. And that wraps up our segment for tonight.
Catch us next week for our next exciting gossip.